Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
Lead left, grow right. Yes, once again, we are talking to Tony Marolt today. Again, the owner of the company based out of Kansas City, Missouri. There's so much to him, his company, his leadership. He can guide you. Also, an author. Leadleftgrowright.com is the website, and his publishing company and consulting. He can tell you a little bit about that. How are you today?
I'm doing great, Jill. How about yourself?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you. Please
Excellent.
introduce yourself to our listeners, and then we'll do a little recap from last week and continue the
Sure.
conversation.
Sure. So my name's Tony Marolt, as Jill said. My background in a nutshell is I went to the United States Naval Academy, served 9 years on 3 different ships in various leadership positions. Also taught students back at the Naval Academy for a while, which was amazing. Then I left the Navy and got into the corporate world. I spent over 25 years,
Wow.
about 15 in supply chain positions and 10 in IT technology. And then I parted ways and started my own company.
Congrats. And here you are today.
That's right.
Let's do a quick recap from last week. We started off with the elevator speech, what that has to do with, and we talked about one of your favorite authors. Go ahead, recap for us.
Right. Okay, great. Yeah, so your elevator speech is something important. I think an elevator speech, I was thinking about this as we were waiting to get on. With a lot of folks working from home, the elevator speech probably doesn't apply, but that means it makes it even more difficult to get in front of people a lot of times. So an elevator speech, if you're in a building environment, essentially says if you have you're going from the 10th floor to the second floor. So let's say you have 15 seconds at most. What are you going to, and the CEO or someone high in the company walks in, what are you going to talk with them? You do have the choice to remain silent, but you also have an opportunity to shine and ask them questions or talk about your department or yourself. So that's what an elevator speech is. Are you prepared to do that? So you kind of have to rehearse it a little bit.
Yeah, I'm prepared. I'm ready. All right.
That's right. I'm Jill Dickalini. I'm a world famous
I dropped my
interviewer.
mouse. Yes, sorry. I dropped my mouse. This happens from time to time, but I'm still here. Go ahead.
So character versus compromise. We started talking about one of my all-time favorite authors, John Maxwell, and since he's written over 50 books, we can't cover any of that or very much of that. And we barely made it to chapter 1 of one book last time. But one of the concepts we talked about last time was character versus compromise. And I kind of wrote up on the board behind me, integrity equals character.
Yep.
And character means you have a choice. And I know you at first struggled a little bit with what that was, which is completely understandable.
I needed more. I needed help. You guided me the right way. Go ahead.
So if you're building your character, you're building your integrity, you always come upon situations where you have a choice to either maintain that integrity or compromise it to some degree. So regular compromise is certainly part of business. We're not talking about that. Compromising would be if the boss says, well, this report's a couple days late, but can you backdate it for me? And so that would be a choice for you as to what you want to do. And we just have to understand that every time, if character and integrity is our foundation, if we've had a great upbringing and good friends and we didn't go down the wrong path, etc., we may have a very strong foundation. If, however, we had things that happened in our past that didn't lead to great character development, then we may not. And so you have to build that up. But every choice can either strengthen that or take away from that or chip away at it. So you have a choice as to whether you want to compromise those values or whether you want to stay strong, stay firm, and say, nope, these are my principles. Then there are very difficult situations that you get yourself into as you head into the real world in corporate or nonprofit work or the military that you have to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
And then one last thought. We talked a lot about different parts of what Maxwell says, but one of the quotes that we didn't get covered completely last time, but I think I read it, but that was it. And Maxwell says, if you can become the leader you ought to be on the inside, and I read that as what do you aspire to be, right? This is what I want. I want to be a great leader. So if you can become the leader you ought to be on the inside, you will become the leader you want to be on the outside. So it's only through actions that you take on the outside that will allow you to be a leader. Does that make sense?
Yep. Actions speak louder than words. Now you got me singing a song as always.
So I guess to start off today, we're going to do a little bit more of Maxwell. And question for you, Jill, is when's the last time you saw someone take a real stand? Sometimes we call that dying on a hill, but when either yourself or someone else did you see someone really take a principled stand?
I'm going to say it was me. It was a year ago. I went to, we have the local cable company here. It's called Cablevision. I went to the Cablevision store. There was a long line and people bringing their boxes, having issues with the remotes or their cable boxes. And as I'm standing there in line, there's this man who's up at the counter screaming at the sales associate, like then started cursing at her. And everyone's silent and quiet. No one says anything. Yep. And I jumped up and I walked over. I said, how dare you speak to her like that? This is not her fault. She doesn't deserve this. I said, and then he started yelling at me. I said, yell all you want. I said, but that's not how you, I said, but that's not how you're going to get help from anyone here. Then the manager came over, started talking and helped him. And then when my turn came up later, she's like, thank you so much for doing that, for standing up for my associate and, and said anything. And I said, he has no right talking to you. It's not your fault that the box isn't working. He's not. So I hope everyone learned a lesson watching, because everyone just, it's kind of like that reality, that TV show. What is it called when he puts people on the spot? Like he sets up hidden cameras at the diner and he has like a couple arguing and see who's going to step in. What would you do? Something, but it was like that moment. Everyone froze and no one said anything. And I'm like, no one else is going to say something and stick up for this woman. I went right over to him and I'm like, and then of course, then you get home and everyone's like, oh, he could have had a gun. He could have had this. I'm like, oh, well, I'm like, I don't care. That just wasn't right. And nobody was saying anything, not even her own bosses or employees. Everyone just sat there like, so anyway, I just was quick to jump in. So I felt like that was a good leadership role. And I hope that instilled in others. Maybe next time they'll be more vocal about a situation that's not right.
That's a fantastic story. And it's so rare nowadays, right? And you did show amazing leadership. The majority are just going to stay silent because people don't want to get involved. They're afraid something's going to happen or whatever. But it takes, I hate to say it, but it takes guts to be a leadership.
It takes moxie, I'd say.
That's
Remember the word
moxie?
I like the word moxie.
Moxie's
but it's so
a great
true.
word. Yeah. And you weren't doing it for yourself. You were just saying, this is not acceptable against my moral code, my values, everything I stand for. So I'm going to say something. And you do, and you did that. And of course you get thanked. I've done that several times as well. And you certainly don't need to get thanked,
but it just feels like the right thing to do. Of course.
It's the right thing to do. And it's like, well,
don't need
what kind of always goes through my mind if that happens is
like,
wow. So how come no one else jumped in? Because if it's the right thing to do, either my value set is so far outside of the norm, or people are just so afraid in society today to speak up. And in some ways, I think
you said it. Yeah, you said it. They're afraid. It's so scared. It's a shame that so many people are scared. It really is.
Yep. Well, I think we're conditioned, right? Because when you're young kids, you're young kids, your little brother, the big brother, they'll stand up to each other and say, no, you took my toy or whatever. They're not afraid they have plenty of moxie. But
I might have another incident to tell you what happened just 2 nights ago. Go ahead.
oh,
Go ahead.
go ahead.
Wait,
No, you go
wait,
ahead. I want to hear the incident.
wait, all right. So I take my kids skiing. One has an eye infection. So on the way home, we stopped at the doctor, got a prescription. Now I go to the pharmacy, which closes at 7. I pull up on the drive-through at 6:53. There was one car
Yep.
in front of me. I'm like, I can go in or I'll go in the drive-through. There's only one car, not a big deal. So
Yep.
6:57, the car pulls away. I pull up at 6:57, and the guy's standing there hitting the button, and he's closing the gates on my face.
Oh my God.
Oh, I'm like, oh no. I got it. I tell the guy behind me what just happened. I said, there's still 3 minutes. I said, this is her. I said, I have a sick child. Then I called my boyfriend. I said, if I get arrested, I'm here. This is why I'm going in. So I literally pull up front, park in the fire zone, and the kids know I'm upset. And I'm like, stay here. And they got so upset they followed me in, but I ran into CVS, went to the back. I said, and they were still open because there was 2 minutes, maybe like 1 minute left at this point. By the time I got in at 6, I said, how dare, I said, and there was like 8 people there. I said, how dare one of those gentlemen, I said, shut the gate on my face. I have a sick child. I got here on time. I need my medication for him. I'm not leaving here without it. And they were still like, okay, no problem. But they were still open. They had one gate down, but one lady was still helping people. I'm like, how rude. I said, how dare.
Yeah.
I said, I just felt like a crazy mom. But at the same time, I'm like, I hope they learn a lesson. Like
Right.
you can't close 3 minutes early. Okay.
No.
I mean, and to look me in the eye and hit a button and have it close on me, and then I'm bringing the call button. I was so offended, but I'm like, I hope they learn the lesson. You don't do that. That's not right.
No,
and then my kids come running in behind me. I said, see this one? He's got an eye infection. He needs his medication. We're here on time. I'm like, I'm never that way, but I was that way. But I'm thinking people can, it was a leadership lesson, but it was also crazy lunatic mama bear.
Yeah. I mean, it's different if you're arriving at a restaurant 2 minutes before they close and expecting the kitchen to do.
That's different.
That's a whole different situation. But if you're a business and you're offering a product or service and you say you're open at a certain, you at least have to have a person there to talk with that. I can't believe. I mean, if I were the manager of that pharmacy, it would not be a good day for that individual. So.
But I got my medicine. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry. Let's continue.
No,
I don't want to run out of time for you again.
That's okay. That's okay. We've got time. If we can't finish this week, we'll continue to next week because it's a leadership dialogue, right?
Yep. And I'm having issues with my camera, and I'm trying to plug this in, and it's not working. So go ahead, continue. I'm just in the dark.
Okay. So, so this is perfect because my next question was going to be, how'd you feel when that person took a principal stand? And since you were the person in both of those cases, you've already articulated very well.
Thank you.
How you feel. Yeah, no, that's great. So, one thing Maxwell talks about is, again, character is everything that makes you up. But to me, the major foundation that underpins everything about character is integrity, right? There are things around, do you allow yourself to lie or to steal, even if it's a little bit, or cheat, or any of those kinds of things? Take advantage of people, be rude like that one guy was. In both situations, you had someone who was completely rude and off balance. So that all is character, but to me, the underpinning of all that is integrity.
Yes. Yeah.
So just as I led off when we talked about the recap about, character versus compromise, what's your foundation? Well, then he goes a little bit further and he says, okay, so let's assume you got a big block of foundation, cement. And he says, cracks in someone's character only get deeper and more destructive in time. So how do they get deeper and more destructive? It's every time you compromise on your character, right? So if you say, well, it's okay if I took advantage and of that person a little bit, or it's okay,
maybe,
it's okay if I just slide this, pack of gum under, and it's like every time you do those things, those are the cracks that start again hitting your foundation, and they get big real fast. It takes a long time to build up your character. A lot of time people say your reputation is also your character.
Of course.
So it takes a long time to build it up. And the only way you build it up is, like we said, making the right kinds of choices that are in alignment with your values. So when you go out of it, that's when it starts breaking down very quickly. It's sort of like it takes a while to build up a statue or a building, but it doesn't take long for a wrecking ball to break it all apart. And that's what we're talking about. So, so then he says, how do you fix that if you've got cracks in your character? And how do you improve it? So the first thing is you got to do a lot of self-reflection.
Search for them. Yeah, gotta find them.
You have to be willing to acknowledge it, first of all, because if you say, well, no, I have great character, and you know that the person you are today is a lot different from the person you were 10 years ago who maybe had great character. So exactly, you called it out. Search for the cracks. So you got to find out. And sometimes that might mean talking to a best friend or someone else to really get, I'm sorry, I knocked the table there, to really find out what's going on, because you may be someone who is a good assessor. I'm generally pretty good at assessing, but there's some areas that every one of us has blind spots, right? So it's good to get someone else, even if you kind of put your list together and say, okay, this is kind of what I think, where I can really improve in my character development. And they might say, yeah, I think you got 90% of it, but you forgot maybe this and this. Say, oh, that's a good idea, right? And then look for patterns. So if you have a crack that started small and then it starts getting giant, a lot of times a good example of that is lying, right? We teach our kids to be honest, but at some point we say our first lie as a child, as a teenager, and then as an adult. And then after that, hopefully when you're younger, your parent catches you and says, no, I always know you've got to tell when you lie, your ears wiggle or whatever it might be, right? So, and as an adult, you also know when you're shading the truth just a little bit. Well, the next time every time you do it, it's a lot easier to shade and to lie further, and the lies become bigger, and that can become a real trap. So look for the patterns of what have I done, and maybe start with what's the stuff that I've done more regular. That's where the pattern identification becomes important. And then you have to face the music and just say, okay, I definitely I have a huge gap here.
Yeah.
I've manipulated people, whatever that transgression might be in your character. Face the music, look in the mirror, say, okay, yep, that's me, and I'm accountable. If you never do that step, you will never fix anything in your character. The first on the road to any kind of recovery, it's always admitting, okay, here's what I did wrong. And then you start rebuilding. So you got to put a plan together and then execute it and say, okay, next time if I'm tempted to tell a lie, for instance, I'm going to tell the truth completely. And then that's how, and you say, oh, that felt pretty good again to tell the truth. And you start building on that, because it's not going to happen one time. If it was a pattern that led to that happening, that making that crack large, then it's going to take multiple situations for you to build it back together in a cement. And then again, you have to have accountability, real characters being bigger, as we said, on the inside. And your self-talk goes a long way. I mean, I'm not a psychologist, but I read enough about psychology and about leadership situations that your self-talk is really important. If you keep telling yourself, hey, I'm a good person, but I have a tendency to lie, I'm going to start telling the truth and emphasize on the positive. Pretty soon your brain starts taking that over and starts working with it. So that's kind of the cracks in the character thing. And then this one I thought was this always has struck with me whenever I've read it. Maxwell says, leadership is not a function of position. It's a function of role and activity. So
Yeah.
what's he saying there? You know, leadership is not a function of position. So
Uh-huh.
just because you are the vice president of human resources
Yeah.
does not automatically give you a free pass on character. If anything, the higher up you go, the better character you ought to be. But we have countless examples of people. You know, Enron's a good one where it wasn't just one executive; it was multiple executives where that led to the downfall of his Shell energy company, basically.
Yeah.
Not Shell itself, a Shell corporate or Shell of itself. And so he says it's a function of role and activity. And so that second part is really important to me personally because that says that any role can be a leader. If it's by role and activity, that means whatever I'm doing, whether I'm digging ditches, whether I'm programming a computer, I have a function, I have a role, and I am doing something to further that or take away from that. And so that's where my belief in part stems from, is that everyone is a leader, period, the end, right? Which we've talked about. And we have still a few minutes, so I'm going to keep going if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
So it is inherent, in Tony's opinion, for everyone to be leaders. And that statement there, it's simple. It's not a function of position. But so many people in society, we automatically defer. We're taught that, okay, the higher up, the more important your position is. Okay, you're a director. Well, you're really important. Well, you're really important, but you're less important than a vice president, who's less important than a senior vice president, who's less important than the CEO or the COO. So you don't automatically get it by position. And I think I say in my book, you know, even in the military has much more positional authority because you've got stripes on your shoulders or stars on your, if you're an officer. But that very rarely, if you're a good military officer, do you have to use that positional authority that's granted to you, where you could get someone, you know, punishment for doing some infraction, wearing their hat wrong or something. Usually it is through great leadership. The bad leaders are the ones that just rely on those stripes or that position of authority to demand and command other people. And they're always the worst remembered people in your life. So.
Yeah. Well, do you want to talk a little bit about how we have to be, you know, technically savvy to be better
You
as
know,
a leader? That's kind of
that's a bigger
like
topic. So
I didn't know.
let's leave that. Let's leave
Okay.
that for next time, and then we'll leave with a little teaser. A good friend of mine sent me this picture that she had seen from something called proactive coaching, and it says, leadership is not about being the best. Leadership is about making everyone else better. And I just was like, wow, that is so in line with, you know, we've talked many times about Lao Tzu and a leader and people at the end saying, we did this ourselves. This is exactly that. Leadership is not about being the best. It's about making everyone else better.
Yeah.
So I'll leave you with that thought. And if we have some other thoughts, we can talk about it. And next time we'll talk about being technically savvy, and then we'll get into some other subjects. Okay.
Awesome. Sounds good. We still got 3 minutes left, Tony. So
okay,
let's also remind people how to contact you. And how would you like to close off the show?
Yep. So again, please contact me. I haven't had very many reach outs, but please contact me either through the contact form at Lead Left Grow Right, all one word, leadleftgrowright.com, or you can call me at 816-694-7444. 4656, or you can shoot me an email directly to my Gmail at tony.marolt, M-A-R-O-L-T, tony.marolt@gmail.com.
Beautiful. And how do you want to leave off today with our listeners? And any quotes or anything you'd like to share?
Well, I'd just like to say, at this point, we've been doing this for a while, so I really
You're
would
a pro.
appreciate feedback from people, questions from people, because then Jill and I can discuss those on air, and it would be great if we can do that. Or
Yeah.
if it's something more private, that's fine. I can address it individually, but I would love to have some things to discuss. So if you're following, please don't be shy. Be a leader like Jill. Step out of the line and ask. And again, I really appreciate you having shared those, because those are two great examples of being a leader.
Perfect.
Thanks so much, Jill.
Thank you so much, Tony. Have a fantastic day.
Okay, you
And
too.
to all of our listeners, stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
Mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house. And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned. This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.